The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Paranormal Concept right here on Parasearch UK Radio with your host, Paul Rook.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and as always, I've got the lovely Kerry Greenaway with me. Hello, Kerry.
Hello, how are you?
I'm okay, just getting over the man flu. I managed to survive.
Good, thank God for that. I mean, we thought it was going to lose you there at one point.
I thought I was going to lose me at one point. But
you soldiered on.
Absolutely, I did say that I'd come back as like an EVP just for the radio show.
Well, we all know that I can't hear EVPs, everybody, so that really wouldn't have helped me much. Maybe try the Ouija board or something.
Try it through the chat room, so I'll say my bit and everyone can tell you what I said.
Yeah, we'll do it that way, right? But like, what's he saying? Yeah. Can someone hear him? Anyone understand him?
Hopefully. So how's your week been?
It's all right, actually. My computer's back. Woohoo! And, yeah, catching up with everything, basically, that I'd done, but wasn't able to do on the computer. So I'm busy typing this way. I've got, like, poor sore fingers. But, no, it's all good. I'm happy again.
Good. So, yeah, tonight's show. We decided upon the concept of, well, do you want to explain it? Because it's you took a different turn to what I was expecting.
Yeah, I did. I tell you why. Because the concept of do ghosts protect us, right? Which kind of like, or do ghosts haunt a building? What the concept was: do ghosts haunt a building to protect, as a form of protection? That was the concept that came to the table. And I was like, well, it doesn't matter if it's a castle or a building or a doll. It doesn't matter. All of those are inanimate objects, right?
Yep, they are.
Yeah. So then the question should be, before we even get to the point of why they're inhabiting these buildings, dolls, houses, lakes, whatever, yeah, the point of it is, can they? You know, is that a possibility? And if that is, then what's the mechanics behind it? Because, you know, I've done
lots of investigations, I must admit, in people's houses, castles, forts, everything like that. But I can't ever say that I've investigated a doll's house.
No, but regardless, it's still bricks and mortar. It's still inanimate.
Well, yeah, okay, I get what you're saying.
Right? That's where my thought patterns went. So, okay, so if that's the case, there must be a reason behind why they're haunting. Regardless of what the object is or whatever the thing, the inanimate object is, there must, the reason behind why they're haunting it. So the question to me was, can inanimate objects hold energy in the first place? And if they can, then what's the mechanics behind it? So I kind of went off on a tangent. I went down a little rabbit hole. When I started looking into, I thought this would be easy. We'll find hundreds of examples where you've got a spirit that's haunting for protection.
Yeah.
You're going to be shocked, guys, because not many stories out there regarding hauntings for protecting a specific thing. They're always linked to ownership of the property or a tragic event that happened in the property, or an event that happened in the property that's got an emotional charge to it. There was always a reason other than, well, I'm just that loyal, I'm going to protect my building. Yes, they might have loved it, but that's not protecting. The concept was protecting the building, you know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah.
And it took me down like a rabbit hole. So I kind of went with straight away, so do inanimate objects, regardless of what that object is, how big that is or small that is, can they actually hold energy? And obviously this is a debate that's been ongoing for God knows how long in the paranormal field.
I think we should call this the Beetlejuice theory.
Why the
Because Beetlejuice was a little ghost, wasn't he? And he lived in the little house on the model. And he was there to protect the spirits from the living.
Right.
So there you go.
Clearly haven't seen that film for a while, have I?
So we're calling it the Beetlejuice theorem.
Right, okay, we'll go with the Beetlejuice theory. No idea what you're talking about right now. Although there could be a few people saying that in the chat room by the time I've finished. Okay.
Basically.
Okay, right. So the concept is, to start off the conversation, do inanimate objects or buildings hold energy? Right?
Yeah.
Well, this is actually a scientific fact. The scientists, good old scientists, so we're donning white coats and safety glasses, they report that all objects do hold energy. Now, there is energy in different forms, but it's present in all animate and inanimate, I can't even speak these words, objects. But the energy falls into two types. Now, the first is potential energy, which consists of chemical, nuclear, stored mechanical, and gravitational, right? Now, the second type is kinetic, and this consists of radiant, thermal, motion, sound, and electrical. So whether a thing appears to be moving or standing still, that energy is still present, but everything is energy in one form or another.
So the second type, with the kinetic energy, would put an explanation to the stone tape theory?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. However, inanimate even objects are infused with potential energy, so they are energy at rest. Okay, so basically a potential energy is seen sort of in rocks, pencils, seeds, coiled springs, those sort of things. They're the things that have that potential to have energy.
Yeah.
So, but it needs some form of release. So it needs an action to then release that potential energy.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone following me so far?
Yeah, it's almost like the energy is gunpowder, but to set the energy off, you need the spark. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
so you need to apply some other force to release that potential energy.
Okay.
Okay. So once you've released that energy is then energy in action. So it changes from potential energy to energy in action, or kinetic energy.
Okay.
Right, so it's those. Right, so if this is the case in what we know as physics, this is a thing. It's not. I'm not making that up. That's a scientific fact. Okay, so what we've got to then think of is, what if when we work in regards to like a psychic way, that's a form of action to release that energy. So yes, we can't prove it, but maybe that thought or that working in a psychic way or a spiritual way is the energy, the action energy that is needed to release that potential energy from an inanimate object. So it transmutes the energy that's being stored in the inanimate object into action energy. So it's then able to release its whatever energy it's holding, whether that be a memory, whether that be a ghost or spirit, whatever it's holding, our action of psychic energy, our psychic work. Now, again, we can't prove that, but it's a theory. It's an action that releases potential energy.
And it's very plausible as well. So, I can understand that.
Okay, so that's where I was sort of going with this one. So it actually releases the energy into a transmittable form rather than a kinetic form. So rather than seeing it in action, it's transmitting it in action.
Which is basically what you'll get if, obviously, the stone tape theory is in practice. That's sort of the images that it would portray.
True.
So, yeah, okay, I can grasp that so far.
Okay, so I thought about this, and I thought, right, okay, well, got to prove there's psychic energy then, right?
Well, absolutely.
Now, of course, there's a huge belief system around psychic energy and the belief in that. There's, go to your local spiritualist church, then you can see that belief system in play and that alleged working, yeah?
Yeah.
Or even down to something like intention work or the power of manifestation. There are experiments that have been done in regards to the power of intention that have been able to show an indication, I will say, that thought has power.
Yeah. No, again, I can understand the whole concept of intention.
Mm-hmm. Well, you look at the two-plant experiment. You get one plant. This is an experiment they do in schools. They do a plant they're fed and watered exactly the same way, exactly the same kind of plant, same soil, everything. But one, they encourage the children to encourage the plant, to be nice to the plant, give it good vibes and all that. And then they give the other plant is bullied, basically. All the negative crap gets sent to this plant. And you can see the difference in growth in the plants. And the only difference is the intention that's put towards it. And there's loads and loads of different experiments that have been done on this.
I must admit, I've never done that one at school. I do remember having two plants. I think they were like kidney beans. We put one in the sun and then one was locked away in a cupboard in the dark. And then you get to see the difference. I don't remember like shouting obscenities at one and being nice to the other, though.
It's actually come out of the bullying campaign.
Okay.
This one has actually come out to prove that the effect negative and positive enforcement can have on people. So they took a plant, and this has come out of an anti-bullying campaign.
Yeah.
To prove that the words have power, basically, and negative and positive have power. So as I say, and what I think that shows is the power of intention and manifestation at work. So there are plenty of other experiments that have been done on this one, but that's just like a basic one. So if we want to look at power of thought or psychic energy, if you like, some form of manifestation of thought, then that's a good indicator, I would say, of it. However, the scientists won't back this up at point. It's one of those where they argue backwards and forwards, and
that's because they're bullied.
Well, philosophically, I mean, there are 4 different realms you can look at this. Philosophically, well, oh God, when I went into I'm not a philosophical kind of girl. Basically, it says we shouldn't be too arrogant in our assumptions that we know everything. We have a level of consciousness. We have concepts of death, the future, and the past. And science is pushing the boundaries every day. So we cannot assume at this point that we understand or perceive the whole truth. So just because scientists can't prove it, that there's this form of energy at work, doesn't mean it's not there.
It exists. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I've always said that.
Exactly. Well, consciousness, materialistic scientists say consciousness is actually a brain activity, right? All it is firings of neurons in your brain, and that's what creates your consciousness. And they suggest, so again, another theory, right, that it works more like a radio receiver and it picks up on the information surrounding us, and that actually translates into our own personal consciousness. So that's how they explain consciousness. But to me, if you're receiving, surely you can transmit too. So it's a two-way street.
That would make sense.
And that kind of sounds a little bit like telepathy.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't like 90% of the brain's not used. We only use 10% of it or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible. I mean, the brain's a mysterious organ, so I don't see
Exactly.
why. Yeah.
So that's what materialistic scientists say about consciousness and whether or not we can, there is psychic activity that we're able to
Yeah.
do that. But as I say, even they are going sort of like the give and take of information around our environment that is sort of like what creates our consciousness. Right, now quantum physics. Now this one's quite interesting. Now they say that psychic energy actually contravenes the laws of physics, but recently I've been looking into the butterfly effect, which is come out of a concept by Edward Lorenz, and there's going to be a show on this soon, guys, because it's very in depth, very involved. It's very very white coats and safety glasses is all I can say on that one. But when those findings were released, it challenged the basic Isaac Newton's clockwork universe concept. So that pushed the boundaries further, and that was something that came out of programming, on a computer. Just a small change, basically, can change the entire results of something.
Yeah.
So if one concept like that has changed and challenged previously set in stone physics dynamics, what else will come is what I'm saying, to then challenge what has been previously thought.
I mean, that's it. The thing with science is that they come out with a theory, and that theory will stand until someone can prove it wrong. Mm-hmm. And then they improve on that subject. So that's how science works. Mm-hmm. They'll do studies into certain areas, and when they come out with their theory that is supported by their evidence, then, as I said, that's what stands until someone comes along and goes, "Hang on a minute, you didn't do this bit. You didn't do this bit."
But now, the problem we have with scientific research is it's got to be repeatable, hasn't it? You've got to be.
Yes.
If you do a study, you have to. It's not just a question of I did this study and proved this. It has to be replicated or be able to be replicated and have the same results. So it then goes out to peer review pressure, and there's a lot of things to back up the scientific findings and data that comes out of various studies. It's not as simple as anything else. Now, so there have been multiple attempts to prove psychics and psychic energy and stuff like that. God, you've only got to look at the history of Harry Price, for example, to show how much proof has been tried to be done, and that was back in D, and now they're still trying. I mean, studies by a guy called Darrell Bem which were released. He did 9 different studies which allegedly proved psychic energy, but scientists have been unable to replicate his findings. So therefore it then calls his original study into question. So again, you get this to and fro-in thing going on in the scientific community. But going on to the fourth concept, personal experience with this, like I said, you only have to go to a spiritualist church every Sunday night to see it's packed out every single week, spirit medium after spirit medium up on stage, providing information. No matter, we don't know where that's coming from or how they're receiving that information or anything like that, but they're providing validation and information that's actually quite relevant to the person that they're reading for. So, all right, it's personal experience, but it lends weight to the theory that something psychically that is unexplained is going on.
Yeah, totally.
So going back to the concept of going to a location and applying this form of energy to the location, it could possibly be that action that's releasing the potential energy in the location, which allows that information to then be transmitted.
Okay, so you're basically saying then that the castle or whatever is holding the information, you come in with your intent, and you release that energy, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
We can't prove it. As I say, the scientific community is not going to accept that because they can't prove it. You can't repeat it. It's not repeatable. It's one of those concepts that you can't prove. But, and as I said before, that is the cornerstone of scientific research. So, okay, so we go back to the concept of that's possibly what's going on when we're talking about entities and spirits and people going in and experiencing stuff. That's a possibility, right, everybody? I mean, I could be completely wrong on this one, but that's kind of where my thought patterns were going with this.
Okay, yeah. In the context of what we're actually talking about, then yeah, I can follow that theory.
Right. Next step. We're talking about a ghost or a spirit that is staying in a location to protect the location. Right?
Right, okay.
That's the concept of tonight's show.
Yep.
That shows emotional attachment to the building.
Yeah, or object.
Or object. Right?
Yeah.
Now, again, I'll go back to right at the top of the show. When I was researching, I found very little evidence in regards to that particular concept. There was ownership, there was crimes of passion, there was historical events, there was just residual, where they seem to be living out everyday life. But very few, and trust me guys, I have really dug deep on this one, very few in regards to a spirit haunting a location purely for protection. Right? That's the concept of tonight's show.
I'm
not
think
saying
unless
they don't do it. I'm just saying that I couldn't find many cases of that purely for that's motivation, that particular. Bearing in mind, protection is safeguarding, safekeeping, security. So then, sorry, I'm off on a roll now.
I see. I was, as I said to you before the show, I think the problem is that when certain investigators go into a location and they're looking for paranormal activity, say for example, I don't know, they go into a house that's full of priest holes, for example, and there's still priests in spirit wandering around this place. Are they there to protect the building or even each other? Because obviously they've got the priest hole, so it's set in the period of like Oliver Cromwell when they're getting rid of all the priests. But unless you're looking at that particular theory or concept, most people would probably just jump to the conclusion that they were murdered there or whatever, and they're still stuck there, or they're haunting that location because that's where they died. They wouldn't necessarily think, well, maybe they're protecting something in the building. Maybe there's still some artifacts left over from the period that they're still protecting. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's the outlook of the investigation.
True, but where do the stories come from then? Where do the story, you look at a ghost story, that's not the stories that are coming out. Oh, the priest is haunting whatever location it be to protect the location because it's got hidden artifacts. It's coming out with, it's there because it was hiding because of Oliver Cromwell's men, and you know what I mean. The historical facts are not backing up that, or the psychic impressions are not backing up that. That's what I'm saying. So whoever's researched that folklore or that historical situation or whatever aren't looking at it from that direction. They're looking at it from, oh well, he murdered so-and-so and so-and-so murdered so-and-so, or the location was left to that person in a will when then he died, oh my God, and so he feels like he's still got a right to be there. Do you know what I mean? There's those kind of things.
Yeah.
And when you look at protection as a concept, the concept of protecting something is a deep set subconscious instinct. It's a deeply ingrained, and that you don't just see this concept within humans, it's in multi-species. So, you'll see a wolf protecting its young, you'll see a bird protecting its nest. This is a deep set subconscious instinctual thing, and it actually comes out with the survival instinct, the fight or the flight instinct, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And this is only triggered when there is a fear or a threat. So you've got to look at this. So if a spirit is continuing to haunt somewhere, they're retaining this emotional connection to the fear or threat. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
But when you look at the majority of hauntings, they just seem connected to a tragic event or a feeling of ownership. Or, you know, it doesn't fit into that remit of protection.
Yeah.
Or did I go way off into a whole different ball game? Everybody there, everyone's sitting there going, "What the hell is she talking about?"
No, I can understand. But then if you, you do your research and that, you're going to come across folklores and legends and word of mouth stories that's so much better than, oh yeah, you got that priest in that house. He's protecting a wooden chalice they believe to be, I don't know, the Holy Grail, for example. It makes so much better story that, oh yeah, so and so he was killed him and she killed her, and you know what I mean? It makes such a better story. So I think that's sort of why it might get overlooked in some cases, and that's why it might be difficult to find the truth sort of thing. They're protecting the place.
I also think we also have to consider that. The other thing to consider, should I say, is that when we leave our physical body behind and a spirit it seems to be stuck in that frame of time, right? So, they're not evolving. They're not like going, oh, the fashions of today have changed. They're still in that. That's what they wore. That's the time frame they're living in. That's why they can pass through walls. This is the whole concept. They pass through walls, don't they? And
yeah, because that's sort of
they're living in the building at the time, and that doorway may have changed. That's why they seem to pass through a door, blah, 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 right? So they're stuck in that time frame of when they pass. So they're not moving on, right? They're not moving on in time. Otherwise, they'd be dressing up as Britney Spears and evolving with time. So is it residual energy that's stuck in that moment?
And then that's sort of where your stone tape theory comes in, with the kinetic energy being stored in the concrete or the bricks, whatever way you want to look at it, and you've got in with your spark, as it were, and reinitialised that.
Yeah, release that potential energy that was stored within that building. I'm talking theories, everybody. I'm not saying that this is fact, because it isn't. There are certain facts that I can build up around this to give it a little bit of weight, but I can't prove this, right?
Yeah.
So, if we go looking at a spirit that hasn't moved on, that is stuck in this time frame, it's still feeling the need to protect from impending doom. However, no stories are backing this up. So where do we go with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then one wonders if a spirit has intelligence, it feels just an ownership to the location. And if it feels an ownership to the location, is this why activity seems to be more active when changes are being made to the building?
See, I think with the stored energy and the kinetic energy and the stone tape theory, I believe that is literally residual energy, and they're stuck replaying the same scenario over and over again. Hence, obviously, the stone tape theory. But when it comes to intelligent hauntings and the spirits actually interact with you, then you might be able to get a little bit more information to find out whether or not they are actually there to protect.
But again, I go back to, they're not necessarily protecting it. They have a feeling of ownership to the location. So which is why if you start doing like building or decorating, so you go back to motivation. If they have an ownership to the location, you suddenly start ripping walls down or painting colours that they don't like. That may be then why you then get more activity when those things are happening. I mean, we've heard that concept talked about time and time again, haven't we?
Yeah, that's quite
that's a
trigger,
common one, right? A common trigger. Work is being done, and then all of a sudden paranormal activity kicks off. Maybe that's perceived as a threat to their environment, which is why all of a sudden activity kicks off, you know.
Yeah, and this is why I've decided never to decorate my flat.
Anyway, so as I say, oh God. Now, the majority of the ghosts that protect, the ones that I did find that do protection, don't actually have any basis in historical fact. Penny is going to be having a meltdown at this moment in time, I'm sure.
That's right. We're not a history show, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, good. But they do actually have a name. They're called a tutoring spirit.
Okay.
Right? Who knew, right? A tutelary spirit.
Yep.
And I'll name it. It's Tutelary. And this is a spirit or a deity who is a guardian, patron, or protector of a particular place, geographical feature, person, lineage, nation, culture, or occupation.
Could an elemental be classed as that as well then?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. There are other names for it. There's names across the entire... It's multicultural, this one. It goes across the board. No matter what culture you look at, there are some form of tutelary spirit or deity involved. So think jinn, think in the UK mainly it's called the genius loci. Or loci. Okay. And these tend to, and I'm going to air quote, haunt an area rather than a particular building. But if the building's on the area that they protect, it would still be under that remit, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, there you go, guys. Show done. Right, let's go home.
Oh, we've done that quick, are we? Only half hour covered that subject. And I thought you said it was complicated.
Now, I took a look, and I stayed mostly to the UK area, because obviously we could have gone around the world with this one, but actually went round, just stayed into the UK. This concept came up, actually, when we looked at Screaming Skulls.
Okay.
Okay. Now, there are 32 English Guardian skull legends.
Ooh.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah. And there is very little evidence to link the skull to the supernatural events. There's lots of stories around them, but very little actual evidence to back it up. All right, and it's really hard to pin it down. Now, the skulls do represent an earlier tradition, the taking of heads, the Celtic head-taking cult that there was, is quite prevalent regarding these screaming skulls. And you have to sort of like look at the origins of this, but we're not going to go into that. We've done this. Now, there are two, I pulled out two. Just to have a quick look at, really, because, you know, to give people an idea of the Screaming Skull legend. Dickie of Tunstead Farm. Now, you know about Dickie, don't you? Good old Dick.
Well, apparently Mary loves him, but I don't know.
Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. Oh God. All right, I'll talk about Dick then.
I don't know, it's the first thing that popped into my mind.
He resides at Tunstead Farm near the town of Chapel-on-le-Frith. Now, basically, the story goes that the owner, Ned Dickinson, returned from the Huguenot Wars 1562 to 98 to reclaim his farm, only to find it had been taken over by his murderous cousins who didn't want to give it back. They chopped his head off and buried him in the garden, but he didn't want to stay there. Basically, his head kept bouncing back into the house. That's freaky, right? Can you imagine that? And it goes on. I mean, the house after that, the skull basically has to stay in the house. Now, he's actually placed on the windowsill at the farm, and if he moved, then the farm is doomed. Doomed, I say.
So Mary's nowhere to be seen, yeah?
No Mary, no Mary at all. But whenever they've tried to move the skull, then basically some misfortune happens, and they go, God's sakes, get the skull back. We'll live with it, right? And there's another one called the Bettiscombe skull. Now, this is an older skull, and you'll understand why I'm talking about these older skulls, because they buy into this genius loci mythology that surrounds it. Now, the skull at Bettiscombe is actually attributed to the Bronze Age, and it's another screaming skull. Now, this is a farmhouse in Dorsetshire, and it's been there for quite a long time. Now, the superstition attached to it is that he bought the house. The house itself would rock its foundations, whilst the person by whom such an act of desecration was committed would certainly die within the year. And it's strangely suggestive of the power of this superstition that through many changes of tenancy and furniture, the skull still holds its accustomed place, unmoved and unremoved. Because whenever it did get moved or removed, it did its thing. It did its thing, everybody, and caused a bit of a kerfuffle. And they went, "Get the skull back! Get the skull back!" Now, the guy who researched this, who was, oh God, what was his name? David Clark, that's his name. Sorry, I had to scroll back for his first name. I just put Clark. That's a bit rude. Right. When he looked at this, he said that it actually buys into this concept, this genus loci concept, the guardian skull, meaning a spirit of a place, derived from how the place or location was used or thought about. So they ended up being like they're protecting those farms, and if you move it or do anything to this skull, the spirit is going to do something bad to the lineage within whoever moved it. You know what I mean? So it buys more back into this genius loci, protecting the farmstead. It's going to be where it's going to be, otherwise it will cause havoc. And, looking at the folklore and legends of those two skulls, it certainly seems to be the case. Now, this presiding god or spirit of a place lingers in certain parts of England. Many areas where these legends occur actually have very, very Celtic, or Celtic, should I say, origins. And a lot of the places that the skulls are displayed are actually very, very integral in regards to those kind of folklore laws, the superstition laws. So they're facing doorways, on windowsills, hearths, rafters, liminal places basically, which means that's where the boundaries are thin. Yeah, so like a graveyard is a liminal point. It's a doorway basically. The boundaries between realms are quite thin, and that's where you'll generally find a skull.
Awesome. I do know, and you're probably going to roll your eyes at this. I just can see it now.
I'm going to look at the chat room while I'm rolling my eyes, everybody.
Okay, you roll your eyes. When I watch this programme about Oak Island, they're always banging about this chamber that they're always trying to get to that contains all these witches. But apparently they were saying that when they dug the tunnels and set up the main chamber with all the treasure and stuff in it, whatever it may be, because I don't exactly know, they chain up one of the slaves in the chamber as well. So they leave the slave down there, and when he dies, their theory is that his spirit will be there to protect whatever it is they've put in that chamber. And it was quite a common practice for people to do that at that period. And you're probably going back to about 1700s. So that sort of ties in with like the theory of spirits protecting objects and rooms and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Just referring to the chat room, thank you all so much for joining us in the chat room. I'm glad most of you are with me with my concepts and theories. But Penny's asked, but could a spirit protect an individual living in that location? You go into guardian spirits or something like that, which is actually not, that's a different concept. When you're talking about a spirit protecting an individual, that's like almost guardian angel type kind of scenario.
Yeah.
And there are hundreds and hundreds of kind of, accounts of that happening. Different show, completely different show on that one. We're looking at more the building or something like that. But, just putting that out there.
Yeah.
Sorry, change the subject, but just having a little look at the chat room. Should we move on?
I was saying, going back to what Penny said about protecting a person. I remember, I'm sure it was the Enfield poltergeist that we was talking about, and I come up with an interesting twist on it, where I think most of the activity was aimed at one of the girls, and I can't remember. I think it might have been. What was the other one? Because I'm sure we suggested that she might have been bullying her sister, and the spirit was attacking the bully as opposed to protect the other one. Do you remember us saying that?
Yeah, I do remember you saying that. I'm sure we talked around that concept then, but again, that's a very different. I would say that's a very different concept because he wasn't, or the spirits that were at the Enfield. It weren't just the one, was it? I mean, most people focus on the one.
I think we were talking about the old man protecting.
The old man, yeah, but he wasn't very protective. He was just rude, quite frankly.
Yeah, but he was only like that to one of the girls, not the other one. So that's why we said maybe it's a case of that one that he was horrible to was bullying the other one.
Yeah.
So he was only
like that. I'll be honest with you. When I read the book, I didn't read it like that. It felt like a whole family scenario, and it didn't feel.
Yeah, but they're still trying to guide you.
It was focused on one, although it affected the others as well. It was focused on the one girl, Janet, but it did affect the entire family, and none of them were exempt from activity that happened in that location. So I wouldn't have actually put it, personally, my personal opinion, I wouldn't have put it down to that. But I understand where you're coming from on that one. But
it was just another theory that wasn't really discussed. So I wondered whether or not they actually thought about that and tested that theory in some way. But
because they removed her, didn't they? Janet went away for on a couple of occasions. Yeah. She went away for respite, a nunnery, a place that, where she was looked after. And she went into hospital at one point for tests and stuff like that. And activity was still occurring in the house.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what sparked off that train of thought, but it was just something.
Maybe we can revisit that on a different show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just something clicked when Penny mentioned about the protecting people. Just threw my mind back to that point. But anyway, you carry on.
I mean, when spirits protect people, they say that is well documented. I mean, there are books and books on spirits and guardian angels and stuff stepping in at various times. That's not the concept that we're looking at, really, tonight. We're looking at whether or not a ghost or a spirit will haunt a location to protect the location, rather than a person. That they're two completely different concepts, in my opinion. Which is why we're looking at the mechanics of whether or not that's a possibility to do, and looking at the folklore behind. And this goes back. I mean, these protection spirits go back a long way. I mean, there are many cases of white ladies. Everyone goes, I saw a white lady. And then they go, oh, it must have been the maid. No, not necessarily. It could have been a genius loci. The other thing I would say with these kind of genius loci, they do tend to stick or be located near a water source. Like sacred wells or pools or things like that.
That makes sense because running water produces energy. So they could be feeding off the energy there. So I can go with that theory as well.
Yeah, that is a theme. Again, that's another thing that's been looked into. And when I was working on my stone tape theory, looking at it deeper, which is again a whole other show. God, there are so many other shows coming out off the back of this show. It's crazy. That's one of the concepts of maybe that is the amplifier that's needed to create that transmission. Yeah. Possibly. But as I say, that's a whole different theory. So I looked into the White Lady and actually found a story from Wales on this one.
I'm so going to let you read this because it's from Wales and it's probably going to have lots of words that I can't say.
Oh no, I found a good one. I found an English version.
Okay, that's fine, but I'm still going to rest on.
Basically, a lad, a boy, was going to the lake every day. He was looking after his flock, and he was a shepherd, and he would just stare into the waters of the lake. And every day, he went the same way. And a beautiful woman emerged from the lake. Now, she approached the boy, and he was instantly besotted. And basically, she promised to him that if he married her, he would become rich and respected. So he was like, yeah, get in there, you're wealthy. And so he married her, and he became very rich and very successful. And, it was all great. But there were certain conditions he had to fulfill. The first was he would never strike her more than 3 times. You could tell this is an old story because there's no way a woman would put up with it after the first time, let alone 3. Right? And secondly, he would never speak a word of her origin or the supernatural source of their success and relationship. Now, the boy agreed, was overwhelmed with the fact that this beautiful, amazing lady had, appeared to him and wanted to marry him, and managed to keep the secret of her sudden appearance a bit, quiet. He just sort of said, "I bumped into her up the hills and far away." And his father gave them a dowry from the lake, the best stock of sheep, goats, horses, white cattle and everything. And they lived very happily. They had 3 sons. But the boy, the man by now, the married man, he grew very complacent and very arrogant through the wealth and luxuries that he had achieved through this marriage. Anyway, he actually struck her lightly and thoughtlessly on 3 occasions. The first was when she was reluctant to attend a baptism service. And the second was when she cried at a wedding. God, not being funny. These are all things I would do. And when she laughed at a funeral as well, he struck her. Anyway, on the 3rd time of being struck, she stood up and said that their relationship was over. And then she walked back to this pool of water, this lake, and walked into the water, and she took all the cattle and animals with her. He became a broken man, was ruined basically.
Yeah.
And there's allegedly a spirit on the edge of this particular pool of this bloke who's, ruined, crying out for his love still and apologising and saying, "Oh, please come back." And he was basically, like I say, completely ruined. And anyway, the 3 children, the 3 boys, were his compensation by this beautiful wife that he had. And they grew up to be famous physicians of Midfair. I don't know how to say that word. But anyway, very, 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 very famous physicians. They were supposed to actually have become great warriors. That's the time we're going back to. But they didn't. They chose to become great healers. And they were the first in the long line of great healers coming out of Wales.
Awesome.
So that was a story I found about a white lady. And the other form that we tend to have. Now, most people, when I say this, they're going to go, "No, she's wrong. They're harbingers of doom," and stuff like that. But the black dog is actually also supposed to be a form of protection. A protection spirit, a genius loci.
Okay.
And, loads of people have said it's actually, no, it's a harbinger of doom, it's a black, it's a dark omen, it's a bad omen. But no, there are long stories as well of them being protection. Actually, if you look, back down into Somerset, the black dog is supposed to watch over untended children and stuff like that. So he's protecting them. And there's also a case of, and this is Scotland, the black dog is also seen as a guardian of ancient treasures, sites or lore. But most of those kind of folklore come out of Scotland.
Yeah.
Even in
I know
America.
that there are. I know there are a lot of stories regarding the black dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think maybe it's just different folklore from different areas, and
possibly, yeah, possibly, because in America, in the hanging hills of Connecticut, there is also a black dog that is seen as a good omen. They say if you see him once, he's a good omen. If you see him twice, it brings sorrow. And then if you see him a 3rd time, it brings death. Now, what does that remind you of? 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. It reminds me of that kind of... Yeah, it reminds me of that. But this is connected to a black dog. However, when you look at... what's the word? Where people move. Immigration of people going from... That is a folklore that could have travelled, as it were, from Scotland. Got someone from Scotland going over into that particular area, then that mythology is taken with them. So it could be that's where that one could have come from in America.
Yeah, no, I can understand that.
Now, black dogs are also known as guardians of the dead, and this actually comes out from when they used to build a church, and we're going back in time, so we're not talking... when they used to consecrate grounds, they used to actually sacrifice an animal, and a black dog would be what they used to sacrifice. back into the day. So this is very early England, back into colonisation. That's the word I was searching for. It just popped into my brain. And they would bury it on the north side of the land. So then this black dog would then become the guardian spirit that kept the church and the grounds safe from the devil.
Well, I mean, you're saying about the black dog as well. I mean, when we done the Gods of Egypt show, we said that Ra, wasn't it, was supposed to be the god of death and stuff, and he wore a dog's head. So you could even connect it to that. The ancient Egyptians.
Well,
good old age.
You know, when you look at colonisation or movements and migrations of people, it's amazing actually where origins sort of, you could see almost like the origin flow and how it's changed to fit in with various belief systems and concepts at the time. I mean, you only got to look at Christianity, you know, and the religion as it goes through and sweeps across the globe to see how it's, you know, been evolved over time, or how people like take something and then make it their own to fit with their own new belief system. It's a very common concept, and it's incredibly interesting. But it still brings us back to these kind of spirits, these genius loci, are not elemental per se, but they're almost like formations of a spirit over time. So they'll be built up from a belief system from people that have lived and worked in that area for a millennia, almost like a tulpa, but it's not rather than a single person creating that energy form. It's people. It's a cultural belief that's built up. That folklore builds up that energy formation, which would have their intention set upon it by their belief system. So it's an incredibly interesting concept, I have to say. But I still go back to what triggers that sighting, what triggers that. And that's why I wanted to look at what could possibly be the mechanics behind that.
Yeah.
Why does that,
makes perfect sense. And I do think it could just be down to the intent and thoughts projected from you.
Quite possibly.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, quite possibly. If it is what scientists say, you know, going back to that point at the beginning of the show, where you're looking at scientists are seeing the brain, and these are materialistic scientists, they're saying we are a receiver which creates our consciousness. Then by definition, if you're receiving, you must be transmitting too, because you're having an effect on other people's neurological brain cells. Do you know what I mean? So you're giving and receiving, you're receiving and transmitting. And if that's the case, then there is a force.
Absolutely. And I do think that you could also imply then that you are heavily influenced by the surroundings and the environment as well.
Without even realising
for example, if you go into a castle, you know, you're putting out there that you'll see soldiers. Or if it's a castle with royalty, you might see like handmaidens or the royal family, do you know what I mean? Or bits and pieces like that. So when you do see something unusual, that's sort of where your mind goes. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting subject.
Well, psychological cues are very, very key in locations. And Penny, I'm not wrong. I'm dead right on that one. It's a little known concept to say most people assume black dogs are harbingers of doom, but there are the flip side to that where they're guardians of a location too. I'm sorry, but you're wrong on this one.
Yeah, we're never wrong on the Paranormal Concept Show.
So psychological cues. I mean, we talked about 30 East Drive when you go into somewhere like that. In there, it is full to the brim of psychological cues, which sets your mindset without you even realising it without, you know, and don't underestimate your pre-knowledge of a location before you go in, even if you haven't looked into the history, of a location, you're still going to know something because you'll have a basic general knowledge about a castle, or you'll have a general knowledge background about a particular architectural period of time, like Georgian, for example, is where I'm going with that, or Victorian. You'll have a general basic knowledge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, when I go to the location, I must admit, I do a tiny bit of research on it because obviously I'm trying to sell the event to the public.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to be able to have a grasp on some of the history to try and make it enticing for other people to want to come along as well.
Mm.
But there's still a lot that I don't research about the place as well. So like names and dates of people that died there and stuff like that. I don't look into any of that until after the event. But if there's like major slaughtering or deaths and stuff like that there, then I'll look into that as to find out what went on, just to put it in the advert sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of give them enough to give them a taste of what the building's about. Yeah,
because you're doing an event, and that's part of the event, isn't it? You know, you're welcome to whatever location we're at, and, you know, this was blah, blah, and blah, 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 and, you know, whatever. So that's good. If you're going in cold, like I say, you still can't discount the psychological triggers that are there, for which, even if you don't know the actual location, you would possibly be able to, without even knowing the location, jump to some assumptions because of the architecture or the psychological triggers that are surrounding you without you even realising.
But that's it. I mean,
general knowledge, because you have general knowledge. You're taking in information. You've read books. You know, you've done history at school. You know, basics. I'm not talking like names and dates and things like that. But that maybe is enough.
It's like, for example, Dover Castle. You go to Dover Castle, you might not necessarily know the history of the place, but you know that there's World War II tunnels down there.
Yeah.
You know what they were using them for.
Mm-hmm.
The castle would have been attacked at some point through the thousands of years it's been there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you've got that. You've got that knowledge. You just might not know the details.
No, but if psychic energy is a force of energy, and your application is creating an action to release the potential energy into a form of transmittable energy, then that could be why we see ghosts or have apparitions or have activity around a location, or a thought form, tulpa, protection spirit like a Genius Loci. That alone could be enough to create that physical, in reality, reaction, possibly.
Yeah. Definitely.
Who knows? But that's where I went with this particular topic. So.
Exactly. And on that note, we've come to the end of the show. So very quickly, could you give us a rundown of what's coming up this week?
Yes, tomorrow evening on Haunted Histories. I remembered this week. I'm on the right day this week. Haunted Histories are talking about Belper Chapel with Simply Ghost Nights. Always an interesting one, that one. Learn about the hauntings and histories behind the Belper Chapel. On Thursday evening, Sam is alone because Carly's be travelling back from Salem Con. She has got C.L. Raven in the studios. These are twins of the macabre. Interesting to hear. Completely different person we've never heard from before. And on the Dark Mirror Show, we're definitely going back down into the ufology world. We're looking at types of alien and their craft. Is there a link between the two, or isn't there? You'll have to tune in Friday, 9 p.m. every night to find out all about these different topics that we're talking about.
Awesome. And next week's Paranormal Concept Show, we're going to be talking about man-made myths about nature.
Wow.
Yeah, there's going to be a few of them. I've got to dig my book out now.
You have? Man-made myths about nature, eh?
Yeah. Yep. I can't remember what it said in the chapter about it, but I've got the book, so it's fine.
Okay, sounded like a good idea, a topic at the time, right?
Exactly. I picked a few good ones.
Thank you, everybody who went into the chat room. Sorry we didn't get a chance to refer too much to it. We were too busy focused on trying to get my brain dump out there to you all. But thank you so much for being in the chat room, guys. It's been really great to have a quick flick through of the comments that have been coming in while we've been nattering. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody. So nothing more for me to say, but thank you and good night from me.
And it's good night from me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.